Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on the happenings within and throughout the government, your government. Water, water everywhere. But how much of it is accessible and safe to drink? Joining us today is Cromwell Williams, water engineer at the Water Services Department, and Montreville Pemberton, better known to most as Juni. Mr. Pemberton is an assistant treatment plant operator at the Water Services Department. Our discussion will focus on the current water situation in St. Kitts. Is water rationing now the new normal? How will authorities mitigate the disastrous effects that climate change has had on our local water supply? Have a question for our guest? Of course, you can leave a comment in the section about YouTube and on Facebook as we delve into your government, your business. Mr. Williams, Mr. Pemberton, welcome to our program.
Good afternoon. Good to be here.
Good afternoon. Good to be here.
Of course, World Water Day is March 22nd. Mr. Williams, start us off and tell us about the significance of World Water Day.
Okay. As you have said, the 22nd of March every year has been designated as a day when we ought to pause and think about water, the importance of water in our lives. Everyone would agree that hardly anything is more important than water. Basic sanitation and health to agriculture. Water is life. In a nutshell, as we say, in the Water Services Department. And we go on to say every drop counts, underscoring the importance of conservation. So the aim of World Water Day is to get that message out about conservation. This year's theme is accelerating change. And I know you're going to ask me a little later on as to, what are some of the changes that might need to be accelerated in our context of St. Kitts. But the day itself, as I said, is really all about raising public awareness, even though that public awareness should be a every day, every week, every month, continuous process. But the idea is, let us, at least for one day, stop and take cognizance of water, it being so important in our lives.
Right, and of course you said the theme is accelerating change, and so naturally that would be a part of our discussion. But instead, I'll ask you first in terms of the current water situation in St. Kitts.
Current water situation, I will start with the positive. I believe this morning, over 99% of the persons on St. Kitts who woke up this morning and who have a water connection to their house had water coming through their pipe this morning. And we are proud of that as the Water Services Department, because we work hard every day to make that the reality. However, that is not necessarily an indication that all is well and there is, nothing that, there are no pressing challenges that we are facing. We are facing some pressing challenges which we are trying our best to confront and to resolve. As a team within the Water Services Department and as a wider team within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure and Utilities, and as a wider still team which would include the entire government service, because we have to include key partners like the Ministry of Finance and Sustainable Development and Environment and others. So the government on a whole is taking cognizance that we all have to work together to make sure that we have a reliable supply of water. We face environmental challenges. We face the fact that our water comes from rainfall, and rain doesn't fall every day, and so we have to have the ability to store when we have heavy rain, and to be able to distribute in times when rain is not as prevalent in the dry season. So it's a work in progress, and the challenges that we'll be facing in the few months coming when we get more into the dry season. April, May, June, those are usually some of the driest months. We need to be able to meet the water demand during that time.
And I want to discuss that a bit later, but tell us about the availability of water. What has the government done to advance that?
As I said, let's look a bit at the history. Water in St. Kitts has, for some time, we took it for granted that, St. Kitts is a place that gets rainfall. It's a lush green island. That is symbolic that we get a lot of rain. Yes, we get a lot of rain, but look at the development of St. Kitts over the past, say, 30 years, from the 90s to now. Housing took off like a rocket. The size of houses, the standard of living. Some persons, when they visit from North America, if they've been out for a long while, they can't believe, they feel like they land in St. Kitts and they're still in Miami or New York. St. Kitts is developing. And so our demand for water has increased drastically in the past 30 years. And so we have tried our best to keep a pace in terms of being able to supply additional water. Our well drilling program over the past decades is the main reason why we are able to meet most of our demand today, because we were drilling new wells and bringing new water online. We are now at a state where we are we're not able to meet a 24-hour supply. So what we do is we ration. Basically, we close down the reservoirs at night. The wells are still pumping the water into the reservoir, but the reservoir is able to recover, to build up from empty to half full to hopefully full. We open early in the morning so that everybody can get an opportunity to get some water. But then, because the rate of draw-off is higher than the rate at which we are able to produce the water from the wells and the surface sources, because the rate of usage is higher, the reservoir levels will drop by evening. And so we go through that cycle in some areas almost on a daily basis. It's much worse in many places. Some places, you get water every couple of days.
Right.
We're not near that, and I don't think we'll ever get near to that, because we have an option, our back pocket option, which was always desalination. Antigua, countries like Antigua, has been dependent on desalination. Over 80% or so of the water that Antiguans use is from desalination. And so that has always been our back pocket option. I know that some persons have some concerns about environmental soundness or impact of desalination, but we'll get to that.
Right, we'll get to desalination a bit later.
Right.
So of course, as mentioned, that we get our water from rainfalls. Mr. Pemberton, talk to us about where the water is filtered into, the process of it, because I know that, of course, the wells, as Mr. Williams would have mentioned, of course, that we have the aquifer. So tell us a bit about how that is done in the water storage.
Okay, so in terms of our water, we have what we call surface intakes and also the wells. Now there are approximately around 29 wells. We have about 26 of them active at the moment. Then there are 6 main water sources, intakes that provide the water for us as well. Now that water, that process that we go through in terms of capturing that water comes down through our river system. So when we have that water coming in, we capture it at the intakes and then it's piped down. Like, for instance, Old Road have 2 of the main water intakes, and there's also one in the Challengers area. Those provide water in that area all the way to Bastille. Then we have one area in the Phillipses area, Keon, and also Lodge. So that water, we try to capture as much of that water as possible, so we can make it available to the general public. So.
And how does the department make the water safe for consumption?
In terms of making it safe, what we do, we disinfect that water. That water goes through a chlorination process. We chlorinate in different areas around the island, depending on where the water is either stored or captured. So for instance, we chlorinate at a few of the intakes, we chlorinate at the treatment plant, and we also chlorinate at a few of the storage tanks. So other than the disinfecting, when we are making the water safe, as we like to say, we also do a process in cleaning our tanks and also the intakes. So that is how we deal with the quality of the water, trying to make it as safe as possible.
Yeah. And what standards are used in testing the water?
Well, the standards that we use are the standard that is implemented by who is the World Health Organization.
Right.
Yes. So the standard that we are governed by are the standard that they set, which is for drinking water, wastewater, and also recreational water usage.
And Mr. Williams, I wanted to emphasize a bit on that point, the fact that the water is set to the standards of the World Health Organization, which means St. Kitts and Nevis has to be in line with the countries, the rest of the countries around the world.
Yes, yes. So water quality standards is something that has been in existence for time immemorial. Water, recognizing that it is something that is ingested in our bodies, it is like a food, so you can't just, deliver anything to persons, recognizing, as I said, how important it is. It goes into our bodies. I know in recent times, for instance, we've seen a proliferation of bottled water, and a lot of persons have come to believe that they have to drink bottled water because the piped water is not safe to drink. That is not true. That is not so. Of course, if you want to buy your bottled water and drink your bottled water, absolutely, it's your prerogative, it's your choice, but it is not a requirement. The water that we distribute has always been safe for drinking and ingestion, and we have procedures, as Mr. Chumney, who is
Pemberton.
Mr. Pemberton, sorry, is part of our water quality team, has indicated, they have their job to make sure. We are also monitored by the Department of Environmental Health. They do their regular monthly checks to make sure that the water meets the standards, WHO, World Health Organization standards. The pH is right, the total dissolved solids is right. All the various parameters that they check, the bacteriological content and so on. So I just want to make sure that the public understands that we don't mess around when it comes to ensuring that the water that we distribute is safe for ingestion. And I like to boast that I don't buy bottled water. I drink my water straight from the tap because I know it is safe to do so.
Right. Okay, now you referred earlier to the fact that St. Kitts has typically in the past always had water. Of course, growing up, we always heard about water shortages in Nevis. Do you think our brothers and sisters in Nevis are better prepared to deal with the issue of water shortages compared to St. Kitts at this moment?
In terms of that question, in terms of the water situation in St. Kitts and Nevis, I would say it's very similar. Nevis has a few surface springs just like us, but the majority of their water is from well water as well. They're dependent on the rainfall just as we are, and I think Nevis does get slightly lower rainfall than St. Kitts. The population on Nevis, from my last check, Nevis is less densely populated than St. Kitts, so that might assist them a bit in terms of their ability to meet the water demand, because Nevis is not as heavily developed or densely developed, populated as St. Kitts. But on a large scale, the situation in St. Kitts and Nevis is pretty much the same. It is a delicate balance. Nevis does not have excess water to waste. St. Kitts likewise. We are at the same critical point, really.
Mm-hmm. But I would imagine homeowners there, they probably may have more cisterns or water storage devices.
Right, that is true, because historically Nevis recognize that they don't get as much rainfall and so on. They historically had the use of cistern was more incorporated in their building than in St. Kitts.
Right. So tell us about, as you said, that we get all our water from rainfall. What has the rainfall been like this year compared to last?
Last year, you want to answer?
Well, in terms of the numbers, last year we had an increase based on the numbers from previous years. We had a slight increase in the water in terms of rainfall, and as Mr. Williams pointed out, usually our driest months are between the April, June. So we saw a little increase even in those few months last year. The numbers get a little skewed depending on whether, like, climate plays a big part in it. So the numbers fluctuate a lot over the last few years. So it's this year compared to last year, we've actually been doing around the same, if not slightly better, a little worse. The number more balanced out a bit this year compared to last year and previous years.
Okay. So, Mr. Williams, then, somebody hearing this may ask then, okay, it seems to be maybe there's a bit of an improvement taking place. Should I really be as concerned as the officials make it out to be?
Yes, you should be concerned, because the rainfall fluctuates from year to year, month to month. There's no guarantee what will happen, what rainfall we'll get in the coming months. There's a Caribbean organization, Caribbean-wide organization, Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, based in Barbados, and they monitor rainfall patterns across the region. They link into our Met offices here, and they also try to project, like we're in March now, they would send out a forecast. What they project might be the rainfall that might happen in the coming months, next, let's say 3 months ahead. their projection is that we will go into a dry period from next month, that the next coming months we will see the usual dry season. It might not be as extremely dry as sometimes, some years you get drought where it goes extremely dry. But we will get a moderate dry spell coming up according to the projections or the predictions. So there's always the need to conserve and to be concerned.
As you speak of conservation now, of course, water rationing takes place. Either of you can address this in terms of, is water rationing still taking place, where and why?
Okay, so as I indicated, yes, water rationing is still ongoing because, as I said, we do not have enough water. We don't produce enough water to meet the current demand. And that is because, if you look at the last 10 years, for instance, we were not as successful as we should have been in terms of developing new wells. So until we can get some new wells online or construct desalination plants, we will continue to be in a state of deficit, and so we will continue to have to do some rationing in that we close down the system at night so that it can build up and we open in the early morning. As I said, it's not the worst, but it is still a major inconvenience. And one of my concerns about having to do that is that at nights the system is not pressurized. There's no, the water is closed off. If there's a major fire, for instance, it would be much worse for the firefighting authorities because the water lines are not pressurized. So that is something that we all should be very concerned about.
Okay.
To add a little in there, you mentioned because the numbers might say we're doing probably around the same, if people should be feel a little better and be a little more relaxed. What I would say to that is we should always take water usage very seriously. When I say that, I mean we can't become complacent and feel like rainfall today, fall tomorrow. So we're going to rain, or we're going to water for the rest of the month, for the rest of the year. It doesn't work that way. So we just, as a community, as a country, everybody have to do their part in terms of conserving the water. You see someone wasting water, doing frivolous things, then you speak out. You don't just feel like, because the public has this perception that everybody is supposed, like, they wake up at morning, they make water, it's all good like that. And then as soon as the water could turn off anytime for whatever reason, but then you start to feel like, oh well, I have water all week. This one day now, water gone for hour on, it's confusion. No, it's a give and take. If we are not going to conserve our water, the little problems that we have now are going to manifest themselves in the future, and it's going to just keep building and building. So we have to take the water as serious as possible. And it's not just the water department and the government. It takes everybody.
Right, and we'll get to that a bit later as well too, but I just want to back up a bit in the sense that we spoke about the aquifer and the water supply. What are the dangers of overpumping the aquifer?
Well, in terms of overpumping, we try not to get to that point, because now overpumping causes a few problems along the line in terms of, one, it's going to come at a cost. And not just a cost to the government, but the cost will also have to fall back on the consumer. Then we also, when it comes to overpumping, we run the risk of losing said wells in terms of when it comes to the overpumping. We don't want to be just constantly pumping water from these wells, and then we end up with salt intrusion into the water. And
because salt basically lies at the bottom.
Yes. So we try to pump the fresh water, then we leave the well for a bit so it has time to replenish. We always have to give the wells time to replenish. So we try not to deal with the over pumping. Like I said, it's really costly in terms of you have to buy more materials. It's going to burn a lot more energy in terms of having to be pumping water from a further distance now. So, and that cost will end up somehow having to fall back on the consumer. So that's one of the major issues we will face if we have to any over pumping.
But Mr. Williams, as we speak about the scarcity of water then, how does the department balance the demands for consumers, that is human beings to drink, and for agricultural purposes?
Well, there needs to be a broad stakeholder consultation, discussion, especially with regards to water for agriculture. We know that the government has indicated that we need to feed ourselves, we need to have food security. I think COVID showed us the risk of not being able to feed ourselves from our local produce. However, one plot of agricultural land, say a quarter acre, which is a house lot, can use, a farmer with one house lot can use as much water as 10 or more households. So potentially agriculture can use quite a bit of water. The quality of water that you use for agriculture doesn't always have to be of the same highest quality as what we call potable water or drinking water. So we also need to look at other alternatives, whether we can do some surface impounding of some of these smaller guts or streams and use that water for agriculture, as opposed to a farmer having a direct connection to our main distribution system, because potentially we won't have, or we don't have enough water, especially at this time. Now, once we expand our supply, we drill new wells, we start doing more desalination, we infuse, say, 3 million gallons of water into our system, which we currently do about 5 to 6 million gallons. So if we add another 3 million gallons to that in the next few years, that should enable us to meet some of the demand for agriculture. But like I said, it has to be a holistic discussion around the table, because one of my concerns is the cost. How much of that cost are farmers willing and able to bear? And I might look at it in a particular way, but other policymakers might look at it in a different way. They might say, well, it's about being food sufficient. It's about being food secure. So, the farmers, they do have a special rate at this time. So those are things to be looked at.
Right. Certainly a discussion for probably another time as we continue the discussion. Now, of course, the question is asked with the water shortages. What can consumers do? Well, we'll talk about that just in a bit. First, we will take a break. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with Mr. Cromwell Williams, the water engineer at the Water Services Department, and Mr. Marshall Pemberton, who deals with treatment. So the question is asked earlier about what can we do as citizens to help to protect our water supply. Mr. Pemberton, what can you tell us?
Well, in terms of everyone doing their part to help protect the water systems, I would say we need to look at our water usage first and foremost. What I've noticed is persons, we waste a lot of water without even realizing it. In terms of showering, the way how we deal with our vehicles and watering our plants and stuff like that.
Washing dishes, I always
Yes.
encourage people to use a tub when they're washing their dishes.
Well, I usually tell persons it's best to get a double sink. One half of the sink for your soap water, the other half for your rinsing water. Because what you get is you have persons they have pile of dishes and they wash and then they rinsing off one by one. You waste more water that way. Same thing within the shower when you're brushing your teeth. These little things we can do that in our everyday lives. My next concern in terms of trying to safeguard the water and saving water is we see a lot of broken lines in places where the department heads, like the persons who work in the department, we don't usually frequent them. They might be in an out of the way situation. Like sometimes even in our own personal yards, we have broken lines or even pipes that's dripping. Persons say, oh, it's just a little drip, not knowing that, as Mr. Williams said earlier, every drop counts. So it adds up and it comes at a cost. So these simple things, there's a lot of simple things that we can do in our everyday lives can save a lot of water.
Even a running toilet, Mr. Williams.
Oh yes, I have to add to that. Toilets. They are a major reason for loss of water, precious water. Matter of fact, someone might even question, should we be flushing good water down the toilet? I've heard someone mention the time at a conference where they went to a conference and they were talking about how much water you should use to flush a toilet. And someone from another part of the world asks the question, you mean you all actually flush water down a toilet? So, things we take for granted. Of course, you can get more efficient toilets, or monitor, how much water, whether or not your toilets are leaking, because toilets have flaps and they have the mechanism inside of them that go bad after some years, and so sometimes you see water, you flush your toilet and it should shut off after the tank is full, but then the shut-off mechanism is not working and the tank is overflowing down into the bowl. You see the water flowing down the sides of the toilet, but you don't pay it no mind. But you don't know that means that it's like you have a tap open. It's like you have your kitchen faucet open or your face basin faucet open. The toilet is open. It's not shutting off. The water is just running 24/7. You're gone to work. You're gone to sleep. The toilet is running water. And then you get a bill and it says you use 20,000 gallons and that costs about maybe $100 and something, and you say, why the people at the water department, they're crazy. I'm supposed to pay $20 for water. And so, that is, we lose a lot of water. We lose hundreds of thousands of gallons of water every month from consumers who have leaking toilets and other faucets. I heard some of my colleagues the other day said, take shorter showers. Now that might not sound good to the average person. How dare you tell me take a shorter shower? Well, it's not so much about taking a shorter shower. It's about what you do when you're showering. Some persons don't want to turn off the water while they're soaping. So they go in and the water runs for 5 minutes or more while they're in the shower. Whereas they can cut that usage by half if they turn off the shower while they're soaping and doing other things and so on. So we have to start operating as if we're in an environment of water scarcity. But, you know, we shoot ourselves in the foot at the water department. We continue to provide water, and, you know, it's at a cost, and a cost which, not dollars per se, but for instance, when I look at some recent data from the Bastia Valley Aquifer, which we monitor the level of water. We have an instrument we put down in the well with a tape measure to see how deep the water is. And over the last 10 years or so, the water level has been dropping gradually. And sad to say, that was not being monitored as closely as it should have been. What that means now is that we can't continue to pump these wells as we have been pumping them, because we have just been responding to demand. More people need more water, people are building, houses are going up like crazy, more people need water. Just keep those, whereas those pumps were designed to run 18 hours per day, they've been running 24 hours, so we've just been producing more water. Drawing down the water level in the aquifer to a level now that is dangerously low, close to that salt-water interface. So if we start bringing in brackish water, that's the end of it, capiche. You know, we're in serious trouble, because now you would have to stop pumping for decades, 20 years, 30 years maybe, for it to get back to a safe level.
And so the question is, what is the department doing to educate consumers about these challenges?
Okay, well, in terms of education, we have a radio show where we try to educate the public. We do speakings at schools, and like even to this week for World Water Week, our week of activities, what we did, we had persons coming, went to the schools, sent off to the schools so they can have the kids come into the treatment plan where we can speak to them all. At times I've been to schools where, because what I found is we lose a lot of water in our homes from kids. So we try to speak to the kids a lot in terms of how they manage the water. Because I was told by a few kids who I went to their school and spoke to them, and they said, oh, I went home and I told my mommy, I told my daddy, they don't waste too much water because they're doing this because of what you told me. So when we speak to the kids, I find the kids get back to the parents, and they do, in some cases, a better job than us at reaching out. Just to touch back on a bit with the water wastage, what I like to tell persons is, you have a drip, and it's only a drip. Okay, take a 5-gallon bucket, put it under your pipe, put it underneath that pipe, and see how long it takes to fill up. And when it's filled, what do you do with that water? All of that is wastage. What I try to educate persons with, if you are going to be complaining about, oh, it's raining and I turning off my water, what you can do, you can help yourself. You can get one of those storage tanks, do gutters on your home, and even if you have a few buckets, tubs, whatever, and you collect your own rainwater. Now, the water that we supply to our home, you can use that on the inside of your home. And the rainwater itself, you can use it for washing clothes, water in your garden, even dealing with your vehicle, washing down of your vehicle. So it's little things that we can do ourselves.
As you spoke about engaging with children, helping the education, I recognize, of course, that there are a number of activities taking place this week for World Water Week that the department is celebrating, and one of them would be a tour of the treatment plants.
Yes.
Children was there. Tell us a bit about how the tour went.
Well, the tours itself were very engaging. The kids found it like very exciting to have that tour, and also the teachers, because a lot of times we as the general public, we see the water in our home, but we don't understand where it comes from and the process it has to go through in order for it to get to our homes and for us to be able to consume it. So what we did is we had our tour at the plant and we walked the kids through our daily process, where we have the kids start from the process as the water enters into the plant, as it goes through the sedimentation phase, the filtration phase, and as it moves down to our chlorination phase, right into the distribution and then to the public. So the kids, like I said, were very engaging in that. They asked a lot of questions. They tried to soak in as much of the knowledge as possible. I even had one child approach me and ask me, how much do we actually make? Because it was so exciting for her. She was thinking about getting into water managing. So she asked about subjects and prefer questions, and that in itself got me excited, because as I try to educate the public, when persons are engaging with me and they ask questions, I find it like they find it fascinating what we do. As we show them the process, they get a better understanding now for what we have to go through, and they are more sensitive towards the way how they use the water. So that's the part of it that I really love.
So the question that I would ask is, how is the government accelerating change to address water issues in St. Kitts? Mr. Williams, I'd like to hear from you on that, but we're just going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with more in Focus.
The bottom line is that as the climate changes, our availability of fresh water will change, and hence we have to adapt. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis is taking our responsibility of providing a reliable supply of water seriously. Our response to this threat must begin with the necessary investments to allow us to carefully monitor such climatic and environmental parameters. We are going to invest over $200 million over the next 5 to 10 years to build a resilient and sustainable water infrastructure. Water is too important for us to get it wrong. As I often say, because of our small size, it is easier for us to transform our sectors than other larger countries. Some of the investments in our water infrastructure will include, of course, drilling of additional wells, investment in desalinated water, replacement and upgrading of pipelines, construction of new and expansion of existing storage reservoirs, the introduction of modern technology to improve efficiency and to optimize the use of our resources. Of course, we will also invest in our people and ensure that the institutional capacity and structure of the Water Services Department is also modernized.
Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussions with Mr. Cromwell Williams and Mr. Montreville Pemberton from the Water Services Department. Mr. Williams, before we left, we spoke about the importance of the government accelerating change, which of course is the theme for World Water Day this year. How is the government doing that?
Accelerating change, there are quite a number of areas in which we need to change. Can't be business as usual. Climate is changing. Over the past 10 years, just from looking at some of the rainfall figures that we have, we get from the Met Office, we have seen 18% decrease in average yearly rainfall over the past 10 years. That is bad news for us here in St. Kitts. If that trend continues, you know, we will be in some serious trouble. We have to, accelerating change for us means getting the water. And so the ministry, the minister has already, and by extension the cabinet, have already designated or decided that we will move forward with construction of desalination, a major desalination plant. We have one that we are about to start, a small one that is a gift, a donation from the United Arab Emirates. It should be going in the Canada area, close to the shooting range. So we are also thinking that we will also locate the major one that we will construct at that same site and pump that water into Bastia. And that water will be able to also be fed westward as needed, and even eastward towards Keon if needed. We are also on the verge of extending our drilling program. We had some delays with BEAD. We are hoping that we will soon get over those. We are also looking at the possibility of other service providers in the groundwater development arena. So, yes, on the infrastructure side, we understand that we have to move faster. And it begs the question, if we didn't have COVID that, you know, kind of put a pause on things for 2 years, I mean, we would have probably been in an even worse state, because some of the developments that, you know, might have taken place, you know, probably were put on hold. My concern, though, is not just with accelerating change in terms of drilling new wells and desalination plant and building storage tanks and so on. My concern is with human resource, because without people, nothing happens. And I think the department is not in a good place institutionally. I make no bones that I think the time has come, and long past, for the water department to be corporatized. And I'm not talking about privatized, because I used that term some time ago, and a caller called in and said the reason that government don't privatize water is because they have to control the price and so on for the people. Privatization, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, you know, putting the department in a state where we can better manage, you know, some more autonomy in terms of being able to better manage, take better care of the workers and so on. You know, I live and work with the workers every day, and I know some of their concerns. You know that you know, I think if we were corporatized, we would be much better able to address those. You know, so that is one of the things that I think, personally and professionally, that needs to be accelerated. There's also another side of it, because the water side the water coin have two sides, and the other side is how much people pay for the service. And no conversation on water is realistic and complete without that. I think St. Kitts is one of the cheapest, one of the places where water is cheapest. The last time water price was increased was 2001, 22 years ago. Let us be realistic. $20 for water in 2023 is not sustainable if we want to provide a world-class water service. So that is something that needs to be accelerated. You know, because we've been talking for 20 plus years about conservation. Some persons are heeding, and we thank those persons. But some persons, we could talk till we turn blue. I will use the water how I want, because I will pay my $20 or $30 at the end of the month. But that is not sustainable, because there are persons, households that are using 30,000 gallons, 50,000 gallons when they should be using 3 and 5,000, they're using 10 times the water that they should be using. And this is no joking matter. There are families and households that have leaks. They're using 10 times the amount of water that they should be using. And so you are robbing your neighbor of having a reliable water supply. And I make no bones about that.
Right, okay. And as you mentioned desalination, and certainly what that advice that you gave is something that persons really need to take heed of, really and truly. We must be able to conserve water because it's not just about us. It's about our neighbors, it's about our children and their children as well too. So you mentioned desalination is one aspect that the government is looking forward to. We know that there is a desalination agreement in place between Royal Utilities at the Marriott and the government. Can you tell us how that has been working?
That has been working fairly good so far. We started in December. The last figures I saw is that we're taking an average about 120,000 gallons per day. That water is pumped into our distribution system in Frigate Bay. That allows us to save some of the water that we would normally send to Frigate Bay, say from our Bastia well field, and to keep that water in the Bastia area. So it has sort of helped to improve the reliability of the supply in the Bastia area and in the Frigate Bay as well. There are some persons, a few persons who I think now even have gotten back a 24-hour supply in that they have water throughout the night. And so that is an improvement. But of course, the amount of water that we're able to get from that plant is not nearly enough to entirely put us back to a place where Bastia can go back to a 24-hour supply as yet.
And finally, Mr. Williams, because we're up against the clock, you mentioned, of course, that St. Kitts and Nevis, the government is looking towards desalination. You mentioned that there's supposed to be a small plant from the UAE. Timeline for that?
The UAE plant is ready. They have started work on the ground, not in terms of like constructing the plant, but doing the geological exploration or geotechnical exploration. So they're basically on the ground, and that plant will be starting in full construction in a few weeks or months, and I think that will be completed, if not late this year, very early next year. The larger plant, we're still in the process of negotiations as to the procurement of that plant.
And we certainly would look forward to hearing much more about that at a later date. Mr. Cromwell Williams, water engineer, and Mr. Montreville Pemberton, both of the Water Services Department. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on InFocus.
Thank you
very much.
And we thank you, of course, for being with us. Be sure to join us next week at the same time, at the same place for another edition of InFocus. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business. Join us